Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Meggett as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Meggett, and today I've got with us a special guest, Tim Balz with Kalogon. This is a startup that I'm really interested in hearing more about. Tim, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Tim Balz. I'm the CEO and founder of Kalogon. I initially founded Kalogon with a group of NASA and SpaceX alumni. We wanted to initially solve the problem of pressure injuries with seating, so we built the world's first smart cushion. And I've gone from wheelchairs to now Air Force pilots to expanding into anywhere someone sits for long periods of time.
Wow. Okay. So I'm imagining my 6-hour flight over to DC and the level of uncomfort I feel in every single one of those airplanes. And this would be an absolutely perfect use for that. Am I right?
Absolutely. That's definitely one of the markets we're looking at and that we have some really cool traction in as well.
Fantastic. So this is a true dual use type of technology that we're talking about today. And it's not often that you really hear about real true dual use things that have real designated purposes in Air Force, Navy, in defense, and on the commercial side as well. Where did you find your first traction?
Yeah, so we're the opposite of most people. When we first started, we were advised by our investors, stay away from anything government, no cyber, run for the hills. You're trying to win by being the fastest to market. Focus on your core market. And so what happened was we initially rejected it, but then we had a tech scout for Air Force Global Strike Command who was looking for solutions specifically for like pilot fatigue and happened to be coming through a co-working space where one of our offices were, saw the tech and was like, hey, trust me, there's a way to do dual use and without all of the negatives. And so that's where we got our first traction through Air Force Global Strike Command.
Wow. Now, whereabouts are you located? Where was the co-working space that those customers were just walking through and noticed?
Melbourne, Florida. It's where some of the best DoD happens.
Yes, there's quite a big DoD presence in Florida. I'm very familiar with many of the Floridian entities out there, and they're tremendously helpful. Have you found that working in a co-working space that I'm assuming it's got some shared space and some customer visibility with the government, have you found that's been helpful in helping you get some additional traction? And how did you start?
Yeah, so it's helped a little bit. It's one of those things where we had a couple of offices over there. We've got our own space now that's adjacent, like very close to that building. But I think really just the fact that we're in an area where a lot of people are very knowledgeable about how to work with the government as a customer has been good, especially in the fact that we had zero knowledge. And when we initially submitted for our first cyber contract, we really weren't willing to apply any resources. So we were able to get a lot of free cyber contracting advice just from local people. So I think that's where the true value came. And then for how we got started as a whole, I've been working in and around the wheelchair space for over 15 years now. I founded a nonprofit where I refurbish and give away power wheelchairs. And then that's where I developed a passion for helping people with disabilities. And then from there, it just turns out that the problems that our customers with disabilities have are the same problems all of us have. They're just a little amplified. And I think what we found was someone who uses a wheelchair often sits for longer than the average person and performs most of their life there. So they need to be effective while seated. Air Force pilots who sit for 30 hours, that's pretty extreme. And they're probably feeling very similar and they experience actually a lot of the same issues that someone who uses a wheelchair have just because it's so fatiguing. And so it turned out the solution for both was the same. And that's how we went from going into the wheelchair market initially with my background and then now really solving the problems for our Air Force customer.
Interesting. That's fascinating that you saw that overlap and that you were able to see the crossover between those two industries. I'm curious. So your investors initially said, run for the hills and don't go with the government market. And you've said that you found that there have been some positives in your experience in working with government. Have you maintained all of those same investors? Do they still have the mindset of government might not be the best customer?
So I would say for just about all of our investors, I think we've flipped that mindset. For our team, it's definitely been flipped. I think what did it for us was we were so paranoid about it because we'd heard all the stories about some retired general walking in and saying, give me 5% of your company and I'll give you a path of gold. And every company we talked to was like, run for the hills. Do not interface.
Yes.
But we ended up having this group that was contracted to do tech scouting, and they had Air Force generals and such who were able to advise. And so for us, the fact that at no cost to us, we were able to get a lot of that real advice, and the fact that we had the customer signal, I think was what convinced our investors to let us go chase that pathway. And for all of them now, they've really seen how it's a beautiful cycle, because we actually work with a lot of disabled veterans through the VA. And a lot of them are people who used to be pilots, and some of them got their injuries while serving from things that we're fixing. And so I think that's part of it, is the investors are like, oh, you're supporting veterans with disabilities, and they're getting a lot of those from seeding. Okay, this kind of makes sense. Okay, and oh, the R&D you're doing for both markets benefits each other. So like anytime we advance our wheelchair market, the DoD benefits, because then we can apply that to the next seat that we put our tech in. And so I think that's where we've been able to flip the script, is that it wasn't, most people that say they're dual use kind of force it. And I see it's problems looking for, or solutions looking for problems. Is how most people look at dual use. And I think the reason we were able to flip the script is it truly was dual use, and it wasn't, I didn't have the vision to make it dual use. It just was. And I think that was really lucky. And I think it's that we had investors who weren't closed enough to not see it once the opportunity presented itself.
That was perfect. That was fantastic. I think you're absolutely right in that dual use mindset, that a lot of people come at it from the sort of the after approach of, okay, we've got a product now and it's got a use case. Let's see if we can figure out a bunch of other use cases in other markets to make that product fit into. Whereas you're saying that there's always been a natural dual use for the types of products that you're developing. And talking about product development, where are you with that? You're a pretty young company. You're a startup. How far have you come? What's your TRL, as they say?
Yes. So for us, one of the things that makes me really excited is the fact that we have a lot of team members who have worked in aerospace and worked with the DoD. Like while I was at SpaceX, I worked with a lot of Air Force customers and eventually Space Force. And so I think for us, that's what's allowed us to get to a really high like TRL. Today we have cushions that have passed the majority of airworthiness testing and are on a path and on contract to get all the way to flying. And so the hardware is ready. We've just got to check the final boxes, get the final paperwork filled out, but the hardware is absolutely ready to fly. For some of our other markets, we're able to leverage a lot of that for our commercial aviation. And so a lot of the airworthiness tests are not exactly the same, but while the testing is slightly different in the exact test standards you use, most all of the materials and hardware will pass the commercial aviation test. So it's allowed us to go like wheelchairs, DoD aviation, and now we're able to start taking that and have a really high TRL. And so from the product roadmap perspective, we have seating that's been clinically proven to reduce seating fatigue significantly. That is proven to do things like increase your blood flow and not distract you. And so that's where it's well proven. We're finishing up the final testing, and we cannot wait to maybe even be on an aircraft flying this year.
Wow.
Fully tested. Yeah.
Wow. I've worked within Air Force, Space Force, and with those folks for many years now. And I've found that getting something into the point where it is airworthy and that it is certified to fly in some of these planes, that can be an exhausting and very arduous process. And your company's pretty young. I think you mentioned 2020. Have you come that far in that amount of time?
DoD has only been 2.5 years since first contact. It's one of those things where we built our entire company model and our dev team off of what I learned at SpaceX. I went to SpaceX not because that was like my life's goal. Like I love what happened, especially Starlink. When I look at Starlink, part of the reason I stayed as long as I did was I see Starlink as having the potential to almost pull the whole world out of poverty.
Sure.
Besides water and shelter, access to information is one of the key requirements to building an economy and being able to be self-sustaining. And
Absolutely.
Starlink, I saw some early slides when I interned at SpaceX that we can do free or cheap to developing countries. And I'm like, maybe I can make Starlink go to market slightly faster. But also going to SpaceX taught me how do you disrupt a really difficult to disrupt industry. So we modeled our innovation model off of that. And at SpaceX, I learned how do you work with the government as a customer and still do things faster than anyone else in the world. And our culture was built around that, and we use that for the wheelchair market. So it was like we were already ready to be extremely disruptive, even on the DoD side, because that's what we built our company based on.
Interesting. And now, when you say wheelchair market, my mind immediately goes into medical tech and medical requirements for certification and so forth. Do you find that in that market, in the medical use market, that the requirements or the compliance or the qualifications that you have to get to market, are they somewhat similar? Are there as many? And when you're dealing with the DoD, do you find them to be somewhat similar to work with in terms of compliance and regulatory?
The overlap is tremendous. While it's not always the exact same standards, there are even some standards that are the same across some of those industries
Wow.
from the medical side. And I forget, it was explained to me once where I should know the history better, but I think it was NASA building a lot of the early like quality management standards where failure is really not an option. The medical market kind of borrowed that and built their standards off of that. And
Interesting.
so it might be the other way around, but I know that there's like a ton of overlap in the way those standards are done. And so for us, the way we do a quality management system for the medical market, also when I started looking at the standards, I'm like, I've seen these before. I've done this before. And then now that it's okay, now we've got to do the aviation standards. I'm like, it's basically the same as medical. So I'm just back to where I was years ago at SpaceX.
That's absolutely incredible. So many companies come into this and find that the regulatory, the compliance, all the rules that you have to abide by in working with the DoD are too stringent, are too arduous, are too complex, or they're too costly to implement and to have as a sustainable sort of line of business and try to merge that with their commercial pursuits. But it sounds to me like you're making that sound, well, you're making it sound pretty easy. That's
See,
fascinating.
I think it's also the approach we took. So one of the things I love about the SIBR program is a lot of those requirements are not required on day one. So on the medical side, we are in the US only a class 1 device, and actually over like in Europe, the requirements are actually a little more stringent than what we have here. And so as we've started naturally expanding on our medical business, we've actually been building a lot of those requirements much closer to the aviation standards we need. And because none of those were required when we were pre-manufacturing for SBIR, we just only had to implement them on the design side and know what we had to design to. But because we do all of our own manufacturing here in the US, even for our medical market, we control the whole thing. So if you're outsourcing, the contract manufacturer that does DoD and is highly specialized is probably not the one that's going to be able to do your medical too. But because we do everything in-house and all the employees who've built those systems initially here are still our employees, we can roll those things in and really find like the synergies between them and be like, oh, the quality management system here is basically the same. Okay, let's take both these requirements together and build it for the first time, like together and unify those. And that's one of the things that I think has been really helpful. And it's one of the reasons we've moved so quickly because we do everything in house. If I have an Air Force customer that says, I want the shape of my cushion to do this, or I really wish the algorithm could do that, we'll come back to them like 2 days later and say, we're done. We got it. And they'll be like, wait, we don't have to go through 3 months of contract mods, re-update stuff. We're like, no, you're our customer, and we take that into account when we submit the contract that we're gonna continually take your feedback through the whole contract. And if you ask for things that weren't on the contract, most of the time we're just gonna get them done and do it fast. Time is the most valuable resource. So if you do things quickly, you don't need to go spend months doing contract mods. You can just make it happen.
Are you then treating your defense customers in the same way that you're treating your commercial customers?
Absolutely. Our team have a reverse hierarchy to most companies. Now, companies won't state this, but this is effectively how they prioritize. So for us, it's customer first, then it's employees and partners, then it's investors. And so that's flipped. And
Yeah.
so the reason we do that is we believe that if you take care of the customer above all else, when you hit speed bumps in the relationship, the customer is going to take care of you. And the fact that we've not missed a single deadline so far, we've actually more often than not done more than what we committed to, means that our customers really committed to making sure we succeed in fielding. We've met their expectations. There's a huge amount of trust that they have, and they see us often as performing more consistently than your big contractors,
Yeah.
and certainly much faster and much cheaper.
Interesting. So you sound like you've really gotten this down to a science, and that's blows me away. And the fact that you've been able to make that much headway in just 2 years. Have you worked your way through the entire SBIR program in that time?
We've never gotten to phase 1. We went straight to D2P2 because we already had a commercial product.
Sure. Yeah.
Our first one we submitted, we actually had an intern just no life it for 2 weeks and submit. That's it. And we won. And we're just like, shoot, that's so easy. Obviously, later we learned it's not that easy. We couldn't replicate it that easy, but that would have been great to just pay an intern for 2 weeks to do every direct to phase 2 contract.
yeah.
So we've gone through, we're very late in the Valley of Death. I would say we're at the TAC-FI phase 3 standpoint. We have submitted for a TAC-FI. Those are starting to be made public, so I can't specifically comment on that, but I'd say that we're in a very strong position, and I'm confident that we have secured the funding required to get it in the air if our customer can move quick enough this year.
Interesting. Has the timelines that are associated with the SBIR program impacted you at all? Have you found that they didn't release a topic when you thought they might, or there just wasn't the availability of the opportunity when you thought there would be? And if so, have you had to fill that gap with other commercial efforts or other funding?
Yeah, so that's one where I think one of our greatest advantages is that we started and have a very viable commercial business. A lot of people might think, oh, you're just going to get distracted and the DoD is going to get difficult and you're going to drop it. But it's really the opposite. Because we can move so quickly and because we've got a company DNA that can operate so much faster than our government customer can on many things, it means there's a lot of downtime. And so most of our DoD like team members, the person managing our DoD contracts also happens to be an incredible software developer. And in between, while he's waiting on customers to get back for him on the DoD side, he's making updates to our app for the wheelchair business. I don't think there's many DoD businesses that do that, but it's been great for us. And one of the things too is we've got a customer that's so eager for our tech and has been such an incredible customer. They've been very innovative. They understand us as a startup. They have helped us ensure that we've had no major funding gaps that meant, hey, I have no way to support this team member. We're lucky we actually turned down a lot of business that's not in our core markets. Everything from we've got opportunities in automotive, in like your recline type chairs, like medical seating, like NICUs, things like that. And so we fill the gaps with those if the wheelchair and DoD market don't take all of our time. And so that flexibility has meant, one, our customers like, oh shoot, if we have a big funding gap, like we might not be able to get their focus again for a while. So let's try to keep this going because we're not dependent on them. And so I think that provides a little urgency on their side to want to make sure that they're claiming our time, because if they don't claim our time early enough, we're just going to allocate it to another market.
Absolutely. You're going to spend it elsewhere.
Exactly. But because we're not having to lay people off whenever there's those gaps, which is often what happens to startups, we also keep building this capacity where the people on our team, like ever since we've gotten our first contract, everyone who's worked on the Air Force stuff, I believe they're all still on our team. And so we've got this continuity of knowledge and we have such a low turnover rate on that part of the business that, and the fact that, like I say, we build everything in-house, any of the equipment that we buy for one market or another benefits all of them. I think that's where people use the word synergy way too often, but it truly is the synergies between the two markets have made both markets stronger.
That's amazing. And it's so rare. You just don't see that type of overlap and corporate knowledge being really built out in most companies these days. Even in big tech companies, people are constantly leaving. The churn is pretty high and pretty heavy. That's fantastic that you've been able to retain and to actually put those skill sets to use in other areas.
It's the priority structure. Notice ahead of investors are partners and employees. And so that's a big part of why we've been able to keep those. And then that's why investors are well taken care of, because we're building for the long term.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you've got a really sustainable model that you're building out here. I'm really curious. You mentioned earlier, I think you said something about European or in other markets, and that immediately brought to my mind, yes, other people have airplanes and wheelchairs too. How have you found the experience of branching outside of the US?
It's been good. I would say, like, for every new market, you have to understand the regulatory and the sales channel. Very often, we have similar problems, especially on the wheelchair side. The requirements for the end product only are really changing when the sales process is changing, because a lot of the different disabilities that we're accommodating happen across, all different cultures. And so that part's not been too hard, but the regulatory, making sure that we check all the boxes in those countries, finding a partner in that country who can guide us. We're big on finding great partners. Outside of the wheelchair and DoD market, we only go into markets where we can have one of the large players in the market be our partner, because we don't want to have to build out a sales force and a full regulatory understanding for every new market. We'd love to have people that can help guide us there. And so for Europe, we have a great partner for one of our products that they sell in like 8 or 9 countries in Europe. And then we just expanded another one of our products, or about to expand it to another, we'll say, continent besides the US and Europe.
Sure.
It'll be announced here soon.
Fantastic. That's incredible. Let me just be the first, hopefully, to say congratulations on that. That's a huge move, and being able to get outside of the US ecosystem and to really be able to accommodate all of the different requirements that come with branching out. Are you also looking at doing manufacturing at other, or do you plan on keeping manufacturing in the US?
For now, there's no reason for us to move manufacturing. I say, like, from the beginning, and this was actually something that's contrary to most investors were like disagreed with me on this, but it's one of the things I learned at SpaceX. Your manufacturing should be right next to where the majority of your R&D is done.
Right.
If not, your product cycles are way slower and you make mistakes. And so I think having manufacturing here, until we get to the point where this new tech we're inventing becomes more commoditized many years from now, or rather, as long as we're continuing to innovate on the technology and as long as that makes sense to keep doing, which I don't see an end to that runway, there's really not a large incentive to outsource just to try to pinch a few pennies.
And I'm not necessarily for pennies pinching sake, but more from the perspective of other countries are, I think, equally as interested in building out their manufacturing and their industrial base and having things built and sold locally that are developed locally. But I'm curious if you've seen any sort of shift in perspective, even here within the last several months, of folks wanting to bring their manufacturing domestically rather than having to import from the US and having to manufacture in the US. Have you seen any shifting turn or tide on that?
Not yet. It's not that we don't anticipate to start seeing some of that, but we haven't had that affect us yet. I think one of the things that makes us unique right now is that there are no good alternatives. Or like there are always alternatives.
Sure.
But when you look at like how far ahead we are of the competition right now, I think that is a barrier that you need to overcome in new markets. Like if you have 2 products that are equivalent and one is made in either a more favored nation or in that own nation, you're going to be at a big disadvantage. And so that's something that we are definitely looking at for the future of maybe there's some final operations where we do like most of the really complex parts of the manufacturing are done here, and then the final modifications or assembly could be done overseas. That's definitely something we'd be open to. But for now, there hasn't been a pull strong enough to justify that expense.
Interesting. Now, tell me a little bit about the experience. Have you explored things like foreign military sales, things with the jets that you may be making seats for in the US? Those also go to other countries, yet in different configurations, formats, or fashions, and they ultimately undoubtedly have some slightly different requirements. But are you finding that's an attractive market as well?
We definitely see that as a potential. It's one that right now, the majority of the aircrafts that we're about to field are exclusively US-based aircrafts.
Okay.
But it's very much on the horizon, not too far from now, that we will be on platforms that are shared across many different nations. And yeah, we definitely see that as an exciting opportunity.
Are you applicable across the entire schema of air platforms, or can you give me any sense as to which ones you started with?
Yeah, so starting when like with Air Force Global Strike Command, that's primarily the bomber fleet. The B-52 is our kind of flagship one that we're really excited about. So we talk about the most, but you can look up what some of the other ones are in that group and kind of get an idea of some of the other long duration missions where we make sense. And even just outside of that, like we have gotten interest and know we can drive value with everything from the Navy as well. There's even from like submarines, like you're typically spending a lot of time seated. And ground vehicles is another quite exciting thing. And then helicopters especially. If you want to have less back injuries from a hard landing in a helicopter, you should give us a call because we've got some data and we've got some innovative things we can do that are really easy to drop in for that area of the market that can absolutely save some injuries.
I love that phrase, drop in and you don't want a hard landing, no pun intended there.
I love it. I love it. So you picked up what I'm putting down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I started with the sentiment that this may be able to help me on my 6-hour flight, but it sounds like it also be able to help me in my several day road trip as I'm going across this United States trying to get some roadside attractions in. Have you looked at the commercial auto market at all?
Yeah, we've done some work with one of the largest automakers in the world. We were quite focused as a company, and it was one of those things where it's like we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin. So we have that on the warmer right now, but we've got plans to re-enter that, and maybe not re-enter, but restart that push. And we've already got some nice partners lined up that are ready for us whenever we have the capacity to do that.
My mind is going a million miles a minute right now. I can't believe that you don't see sorts of shiny things coming up every day in every which direction. How do you stay on track? How do you stay focused?
That's tough. The engineer in me is build it all, build it now.
Yeah.
I have really good mentors that keep me grounded, and I think when I talk to a lot of the people who I see who were successful, they like especially startup founders, our resources aren't limitless, and so you need to secure your win in your core markets before you go and diversify. We built our core markets up in a way specifically around putting us in a strong position to diversify. And our strength there is increasing every day. So even though we are not making specific focus steps in those directions, we are expanding our ability to win in those markets. And for me, knowing that we are making that progress is what makes me be able to stay focused. But man, I'm so excited to one day have one in every single place that I sit for long periods. It's going to be in my office chair one day. It's going to be in my car. Like, I can't wait to buy an airplane ticket and then not even realize that I was about to get a fly on Kalogon. Cannot wait.
That must be a challenge, but it sounds like you've got a lot of really good things in place and into position to help you stay focused and help you build that sort of foundation of the company out. How many people are on your team?
So we're up to 26, and you've hit the
Wow.
nail on the head. The reason that we've been successful is our team. Straight, like, we have an incredible team. Everyone on our team I'm lucky whenever I have to jump in the trenches, which I do love doing. But whenever I jump in the trenches and I look to the left and right, I'm really happy with who's there solving our customers' problems with me.
That's fantastic. And you said that you've got some folks that are from NASA and some Air Force folks that have some Air Force experience. Do you have is equal a number of folks that are experienced on the commercial side?
Yeah, so we have one of the things that's cool is we have people with lived experience as well on our team. One of the things I love is whenever I bring people on the team who have empathy with the problems that we're solving, they typically are very mission driven.
Yeah.
And that's really great. On the commercial side, our executive team and leadership team has a huge amount of experience. Basically, like, my goal is to surround myself with people way smarter than myself, and then hopefully I can get smarter by learning from them. And so, yeah, that's really the key to my personal success is to hire people smarter than me and stay out of their way.
That's fantastic advice. And I'd love to touch just a little bit on here on as we wrap this up. What other piece of advice or pieces of advice do you have for other folks that may be getting into the startup of dual use market?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the problem is way more like whatever your technology is, like, who cares? It's the problem you're solving. Like, that's what matters. And make sure you don't BS yourself into thinking that, like, if you started from a solution and try to find a problem, most likely you don't actually have the right solution for it. But hey, maybe you'll find a problem that really does need a solution and that no one else has something for. So don't be married to your specific solution. Don't be married to the way that you've solved the problem in one industry or another. And just everything is about what is the customer need? Is it worth solving? Are they willing to pay to solve it? And then, can I solve it? Can I provide them a solution? It's not the reverse order.
Sounds stay flexible and stay adaptable to meeting your customers' needs and to helping solve their problems in the way that they need to be solved, not just with the solution that you might have at hand. Is that about right?
Yeah, and building empathy. Like, we build into all of our contracts a ton of travel where we try to map out who is every stakeholder who will touch or interact or be affected by our product. And we want to make sure we get their voice from multiple people and we collect their needs. And that's what we build to map out what our products and solutions should become. And that's a big part of how we've moved quickly. We haven't had you forgot to think about, like, one of the aircraft might park somewhere that's got the lowest, like, coldest temperature on record in the continental United States and have to sit outside there. Did you think about that for all of your material choices, your battery choice? And many times people miss those things, especially when they're trying to take an existing solution and apply it to a different problem. And so I think really diving into your customers' needs and making sure you talk to every stakeholder early in the contract is the key, like what you say.
That's fantastic advice. So many companies just say, the contracting officer is my only stakeholder, and that's really who I need that's who I owe to. And I think that's a fantastic piece of advice for folks that ultimately haven't really gotten that exposure in the market that they're working in and working with the folks working with all of their stakeholders and all of their customer voices. It's incredible that you've been able to build this out in such a short amount of time. And I, again, just have to say, absolutely congratulations. This is fantastic. I can't wait to sit on a Kalogon seat. And I ultimately think that's incredible that you found that the dual use market to be such an effective place for you to play and build a company in.
It's been great. It's been great. I'm really excited to see what our team's going to be able to produce for our customers soon. And hopefully one day for you as one of our customers.
Yes, absolutely. And I can't wait either. That I look forward to seeing how far you're able to come. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure all of the startup founders and all of the folks thinking about dual use products and services are going to find this incredibly valuable. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to ask more, if they want to buy from you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place is to go to www.kalogon.com. And then I'm easy to get in touch with there. If you reach out through contact@Kalogon, it'll make its way to me quite effectively. And then, yeah, just come check out what we're doing. Follow us on LinkedIn is where I do a lot of my posting. So I'm always talking about the new things we're doing. And then we have a super active social media presence.
Perfect. I love it. As any young company should, get yourselves out there, get yourselves known, and make yourselves available to be gotten a hold of. I really appreciate your time today, Tim. This was a fantastic conversation. We'll definitely have to have you back on the show next year when you've made more progress.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Meggett. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.